Cool.
Ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. I've forgotten how to do these already, I guess? I don't know.
Wow. You've only been doing them for how long?
For years and years and years. I'm adjusting my
But
camera.
yeah.
All right. My name is Rotten Dead. With me today are...
I am James, also known as Aramithus.
And I'm Zels, also known as Zels.
And today we're doing Sermon 32, which is a good sermon to be done. It's the scripture of the Mace. It comes after, and this may come as a shock to you, Sermon 31. But Sermon 31, where Vivec writes in her book of Hours and speaks briefly about truth, which is, as she puts it, like my husband, instructed to smash, filled with procedure and noise, hammering weighty, heaviness made schematic, etc., etc. Lessons learned only by a Mason. So that, of course, transitions us to Sermon 32.
Yes.
Which
The scripture of the Mace
does, in fact, give you a skill point in block.
Blunt weapons was a thing in Morrowind, I'm sure.
Yeah, they were.
Whatever. Well, Sermon 31 was athletics, so who can say?
Yeah.
So, Sermon 32. The scripture of the Mace, the first, the pleasure of annihilation is the pleasure of disappearing into the unreal. So we've talked about like destruction before in Elder Scrolls lore, in Vivec's philosophy. So the question we have to deal with now is when Z Smet says the pleasure of annihilation, are we talking about destruction as in transformation? Or are we talking about annihilation as not as destruction as in complete removal of something?
I read it as Nirvana because it's talking about disappearing into the unreal.
Yeah. And annihilation is, the pleasure of annihilation is sort of about annihilating the ego, the self, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I always took it that way, as letting go of the you that was to become the you that will be, which in this case is a deity. But there's so many ways to take every word in this sentence.
I know, right?
That it's difficult to parse.
And that's an interesting thing that Orion's putting forward, the idea of ego death being a fantasy. Which I can see Vivec potentially thinking that, but that much might be because he has such a huge ego.
You know, yeah. The other problem is that for all the study that I've been doing about, they're talking about total annihilation. Oh, it was so good, wasn't it? God, that was a good game. Jesus, that was really good. They tried in a planetary annihilation. Have you played that? By the way, you can check off going way off topic on your bingo. Planetary annihilation, I actually kicked back on Kickstarter, and it was good, but it didn't quite hit that feel that total annihilation had. So the problem that I have while doing the analysis of the lessons is that I've been studying so much Jung that it's really hard for me to read some of these things. Like there's a lot of Eastern, like East Indian religion or philosophy that will talk about the complete destruction of the ego and complete destruction of the self and that kind of stuff, which is not something that Jung really seemed to keep up with. It's not something he seemed to embrace. I kind of get the impression, this is something that Buddhists will be familiar with, that a lot of Western philosophy will talk about enlightenment like it's the goal. Like you have to become enlightened. That's how you become a superior being, as you become enlightened. And many religious, I don't know about many, but a non-zero amount of religions and mind expansion cultures will talk about enlightenment as a step towards the ultimate goal, whatever that is, it varies depending on who we're talking about. But very rarely do any, to my knowledge, I have yet to find a practice that states that I keep trying to say annihilation, that enlightenment is the enlightenment is a finish line. Yeah, it's not. It's actually very difficult to find a philosophy or a religious practice that teaches that enlightenment is the final goal. in fact, even in Western esotericism, even Gnosticism talks so much about, talks up gnosis, which is very similar to enlightenment, but only as the beginning of the path to becoming one with God, you know. But again, because my research is not guided, it's been very easy for me to sort of get these ideas into my head that that the destruction of the self, or the ego, or the perception of your personal self is not it's difficult for me to make that sort of to get to that idea, even though I understand the state of enlightenment is supposed to involve losing your sense of self. It's still very difficult for me to get to.
Owain is saying in chat that the idea of enlightenment as sort of self-annihilation or an ego death being a Western fantasy, or a kind of, I don't know, if I'm reading it properly, Owain, it feels a bit like sort of orientalization of the original idea, a persistent misunderstanding of what's supposed to be going on.
That was also what I was kind of trying to say, but not as eloquently. It's sort of the way that a lot of Western Hermetic practices have kind of twisted the concept around a little. Alan Watts, who sanitized it for a more God-centric Western idea. Yeah, Owain, it's supposed to, like, it's easier for people from Western cultures, and I say that as one of them. For me, is from a son. Oh, okay, great. I'm gonna write that down.
Okay. Be ready for lots of results about tea.
Okay, that's fine. I'll look those up too.
Yeah,
I'm all for tea. Yeah, drinking that shit now. So the so I'm it. I think a lot of that has to do with our sort of Christian view on the self, on who we are as human beings, as individuals, and that the Christian practice tends to encourage the idea of individualism, of an individual identity. And I mean, after all, when we are raised to heaven, we're raised as souls, individual souls, to join God. But at no point does it talk about becoming one with God or becoming God. No, we just sit at his side, or we worship him in heaven. We don't become him. We don't become collective. We just all go up and join the choir, which is a lot easier for people to wrap their heads around in Western culture.
Yeah, it's the idea of individualization as it's currently put through is much more a product of Puritan input. Specifically, there are strains of Christianity that are more
Eastern Orthodox,
and Catholicism to a degree. They are a lot more about corporate ways of being, rather than
yes, exactly.
Rather than just what the individual is, because it all stems back to from what I understand, it stems back to when religion became a thing of conscience in the 17th century or thereabouts, with the movements about Puritanism being something that, and the idea of what church you went to and so on, becoming a matter of your decision as opposed to something mandated by the state in England, at least, and other parts of Europe, as I understand it. But there was the idea before that point that you went to these particular places and you were a Christian because you were in a place that mandated you go to church and you be part of the corporate body. You were part of the community, therefore you did these things. Whereas the folks that I'm on and off reading a book called The Journey to the Mayflower, which is essentially about the movements within Protestant Christianity that led to the schisms that went to the Pilgrims. And the idea of choosing to worship God and choosing to be a Christian as an individual thing was kind of the end product of those sorts of things. That the idea of the elect as a community, as a self-selected group of believers, that rather than being told you are going to be a Christian because the person in authority tells you to, and to stand up in church and so on, was the sort of one of the more distinct originations from that sort of point. So
it's sort of a geographic tribalism in that respect.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Selectives. Hey, right.
It is being selective, yes.
Neat.
Yeah.
So that was the first sentence of 32. So I hope you guys are strapped in, because the whole thing's pretty much going to be like that.
Excellent.
All those that would challenge the sleeping world will seek membership in this movement. It sounds like that's kind of like the sleeping world is a direct reference to Dagothar's
yes,
sleeping thing.
I don't see how to read it any other way.
However, as I'm often guilty of doing, I will. I would bring together the ideas of the shared illusion of reality, the sleeping illusion of the dream, and of playing a video game, and Dagothar's dream within that video game as all being sort of like, did it just happen to you?
No. I've just had another realization on the first sentence.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, the idea that the pleasure of annihilation is the pleasure of disappearing into the unreal. Flow state as applied to playing a video game.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Well, I don't differentiate between flow states and enlightenment.
Yeah.
Nor do I, incidentally.
Yeah, I don't differentiate between those two states, because because they're so closely related, as in you have to obtain enlightenment the way you obtain a flow state, which is you don't. You just let it
exactly.
it just happens, and then by the time you realize it's happening, it's done.
Yeah, you just become part of what you are, what you're doing, what is in
but that's the way I was just thinking of it in that sort of that second. It's yourself disappears, you are just the task,
right?
And disappearing into the unreal, the ephemera of playing a computer game. But that's a very, very fourth wall explanation.
Well, it is, and it's neuroscience would agree with me. Great, I love it when I'm right. The singularity or flow state, of which archery is one of the is one of the best examples, apparently, and deep meditation. Yep, that too. Where brain feedback were compared, and the singularity and mindfulness are the same brain state.
Hey.
I'm the best at this.
Probably the
accident.
thing that I have studied the most in my life are trance states and shamanism and various ways that various cultures look at the stories that we tell in our heads, and how we, how to adjust, what the difference between the brain states is in terms of sleeping and consciousness and dreaming and comas and all of those different kinds of things. And that is absolutely correct. The neuroscience says it's the same.
Yeah, and I often try to encourage people to think about the act of playing Morrowind specifically, but video games in general, as being related to the idea of dreaming or experiencing a state. And the when you're in a deep meditative state can feel different. It's there's not one single state of deep meditation. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to go about doing it. For me, I would find it very difficult to explain my deep meditation for me, so I'm not going to bother. But it has before been very much like the state of being in of being completely engrossed in a video game, and something that has for some time, like over a year or so, had not happened to me for a very long time. And then man, shit, I don't even remember the game that I was playing where it started happening again, and I was like really excited. It happened this year, and it was some game that I was playing, and I don't think it was Starfield, I'm ashamed to say. But I should. I mean, look at the cast we're on. But it didn't quite happen. Deep meditation is probably focused on more basic, essential thing, right? Less complicated than the details of a game, but I think I'm a meditation noob. I don't know enough about it to tell you either, Felix. That's people study meditation. It's their whole thing. It's their whole fucking lives. So I'm not afraid to say that I have no idea, because that's like asking me if I can, explain how MRI machines work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meditation can focus on one single thing, but it can also be a letting go of focus. There's a lot of, as Chris just said, there's a lot of different ways that's
Yeah, that you can get to it.
A lot of different ways up the mountains in terms of that, and
good.
Definitely the difference between a physical meditative flow state like with Tai Chi or martial arts, I think someone mentioned earlier, is going to light up different parts of the brain than a purely inward turning meditation where you're not moving at all, because that is different kinds of brain functions.
Yes.
Yet another, like, wouldn't it just be nice to be able to have an excuse to get an actual scientist on here? If we had ridiculous funds, then that would be what we'd be spending them on, is getting actual scientists on, on this thing.
Yeah. And
watch them be bored.
Subscribe to our OnlyFans. Make it happen.
Yeah.
There are meditative techniques that require focusing on a very specific thing. The repetition of the word Om, which is the name for God, is a version of that kind of meditation where you're focusing on that sound so that your monkey brain doesn't come up with anything else.
Yeah, there are lots of different things that, from my understanding, have that focus of you focus on a thing, and which helps you shut down all thoughts of everything else. Whether that thing is doing hoopla or there are some Christian practices that focus on the repetition of particular passages of scripture, and those sorts of things where you've got a focal point, as opposed to the just I'm going to shut everything down states of meditation, which are
fishing. Yep.
Trying to achieve the same thing, but it's a different methodology. Yeah.
Congrats to Owain.
Yep. Going to be a doctor.
Super cool. And I, by the way, do sometimes use the video game as a meditation technique. It definitely is a different kind of thing, but I use it as a tool, for that.
So all of this to say that, by the way, that was the second sentence. All of this to say that when Vivec talks about the sleeping world in the 36 lessons, I do sometimes have a lot of fun getting myself to think about the sleeping world as either people who are playing Morrowind or people who aren't playing Morrowind.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't be surprised if Vivec felt one way or the other about, like, the whole thing about, Vivec knows they're in a video game. If you're entertaining that idea, then you kind of have to wonder, does Vivec consider people in Morrowind to be the sleepers, or people who aren't playing Morrowind to be the sleepers? Like, who would Vivec consider to be asleep at that point? Which is reality for Vivec?
People who aren't playing Morrowind, because if you're playing Morrowind, you are by definition striving to become the Never-Everine.
True, but Vivec is also aware from the state of Chim that Z does not exist. That the entire universe is a dream. So yeah, see what I mean? Like you can go a couple of different ways, right? Who sleeps the sleep?
I love you all, and that's going to keep me up tonight.
Yeah. Well, are we the butterfly dreaming that we're a person, or
Exactly?
Yeah. And it's in terms of the end of the second sentence as well. All those who would challenge the sleeping world would seek membership of this movement. Which movement? The kind of the suicide cult that's kind of implied in the first sentence, or
sort of. I think when Vivec's talking about movement here, Vivec's talking about the idea of Vivec's teaching. Because the first thing I think of with movement is the whirling school.
Yes,
and so I suspect that this movement is following Vivec. Of the tribunal. Are we Daedra?
Or are we dancing?
Would we be Aedra because we're
helping to create the
we're helping to create
but we didn't develop it.
No, we didn't though.
Instead, we're the Daedra who hung around and watched.
Yeah,
and take away the best elements of creation.
Or are we the Magnigate who are just sailing past for brief moments in time?
Interesting. Adric Todd. I'm just going to call him that in my head from now on.
Adric Todd, yeah, that's a good one. We don't create, we just manipulate and change even if we mod. That's a good point.
Oh
yes,
my God.
that's very
Yeah.
Daedric.
Yeah.
Wow, Owain. Yeah.
Yeah, and we take little bits of it off into our own little places and do things with it.
Yeah, into our adjacent places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Good sermon.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that
So, third sentence.
Gives
I
me a whole new
denounced the alienation of the cloven duality with a hammer. Okay, so the cloven duality is probably the idea of no, I have that wrong.
I clock the cloven duality because the definition of the enantiomorph that Kirkbride was working from when he started using the term was a merged dichotomy, if I remember the way he posted about it. I think that's somewhere in the made up words roundup.
I think you might be right.
That he talked about he looked it up in a dictionary. Remember those?
The lunar lorcan.
And
the Master and Secunda, therefore, the personifications of the dichotomy, the cloven duality, according to Artaeum, that Lorcan legends also often rail against. Ideas of the anima, animus, good, evil. Right. So the cloven duality is the idea of good versus evil.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is, again, that's a Lorcanic thing, denouncing the cloven duality. Duality. I just remember my words. Remember my accent. I'm British, darn it. But yeah, that cloven duality, which is also a reference point, I feel, to the Arabis as a whole, that because you've got the interplay of Anu and Padme, which creates the Arabis, and so those two parts interacting, and they're the original enantiomorph, and so that all kind of plays together. But it also, oh no, I just did not need that flash of talk about lovers labs. No. But
the alienation of the cloven duality. That's true.
Yes.
What is the alienation of the cloven duality? So you versus me.
Yeah. Or you versus you, because goes back to the whole idea of the Anu and his double, which Love knows never really happened. Because I very much subscribe to Scourgicus's idea of the idea that Padme is Anu's shadow self.
Right. It's the same thing. Which is fine, but I would point out that, like, I mean, there's in Hinduism, there's a lot of gods who are off, like, you know, the reflection of another god or something. That doesn't make them not a god. It doesn't make them not an entity of some kind. It just means that. So I mean, I don't have any problem with people saying, like, you know, Padme doesn't exist, but it's sort of like saying that, like, you know, considering Padme as a force is erroneous. It's not. It's out there. It's just not. It's what you're doing is you're looking at a different side of the same coin, but it's still a side. You know, it's still Right. Yeah. Do not separate yourself into black and white terms. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the cloven duality is like the yin yang black white thing, then denounce the alienation of that. Then is that I embrace. I'm saying that these disparate things are a unity.
Embrace the gray, maybe.
Yeah. It's really more about
like
the idea
of double
of
negation to come back to.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
but Vivec,
and to what Yagna is saying, if the cloven duality is good versus evil, then the alienation of the concept is moral relativism or nihilism. I don't think so, because I think what it's saying is the alienation of the cloven duality is the alienation that the cloven duality brings, is how I read that sentence. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
Yes, I think I'm with you there. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, say it again.
The alienation of the cloven duality is the alienation that the cloven duality brings. The cloven duality is an alienating force.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And but it's noteworthy to say that Vivec rejects it with a hammer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the hammering. Well, but Vivec's definition of truth, which we're eventually
we'll get to that.
quote marks TM.
But we'll put a pin on that and then circle back around at a breakout meeting. Okay. So
what
second,
is true? We'll touch base on that in a few months.
Yeah. Maybe around the third quarter milestone. So best practices, synergies, dynamics, outside the paradigm. So second, take from me the lessons as a punishment for being mortal. Okay, so this is Vivec again talking about in terms of Vivec punishing people, remaking them again and again, making life difficult for the Velothi because they are mortal and have to, get good.
Are the lessons the 36 lessons or something else?
No, they're definitely the lesson. The 36 lessons, yeah.
Okay.
I don't. Vivec has two major documents that he talks about: the Book of Hours and the lessons. They're not the same thing.
No.
But for a long time, I kind of liked the idea that they were, but I don't think they are.
No.
The Book of Hours was supposed to be more of a prayer book. The 36 lessons was supposed to be a guide.
Okay.
It was supposed to be the becoming of Vivec, the creation of Almsevi, I should say, is what I think the 36 lessons are supposed to be. And they are, and it's effectively what Vivec does with the 36 lessons is he creates Almsevi and the tribunal, organization, the idea of worshiping the tribunal and so on, of tribunal culture. Which is entirely about letting the Velothi fight each other, a tribunal temple versus Ashlander, and then let the tribunal Velothi get soft and spoiled, and then, drop a big ass turd on him. And that's the that's the plot.
It's Leto the Second all over again. Owain, the Book of Hours is sort of written. It's a section in. It is a section in the in Vec's teaching. One of the obscure texts. There's just it's few paragraphs. It's not actually formulated like a Book of Hours in the Christian prayer book sense of the term. But it is there. In some sense, it probably makes sense to think of it as a longer document in universe, but we don't know what that would look like.
We don't have all of it.
I also find this sentence a bit weird just in general because it's going against the at least common perception of the Dunmer. I don't think we can necessarily say Kaimer with any certainty, but maybe. But of them being the Lorcanic Mer, of embracing the mortal world as a gift and something to get better than. And so why would it be a punishment for being mortal as such? Unless that's a specific line talking to the Nerevarine about the I will murder him again and again until he knows this. Or whether it's just making a more general point about being mortal and the need to be punished for that, which feels very, very Murish to me, which is weird for Vivec.
I don't. I mean, isn't the So if you love the world, it is something that is made of dirt. It is inherently flawed. The idea that it is a beautiful thing to be cherished is the lie of the Aedra.
Right.
So I don't see that as being necessarily a conflicting stance. This thing that you're in love with is crap. Why do you think the Daedra left?
Well, the Daedra were never a part of it. Maybe that's the problem. But to the words you used there, it was a.
Do you mean the Aedra? Why did the Aedra leave? Or the
Atata? The Aedra and the Daedra were all involved in the creation at the beginning, at the very beginning. That's why they're all of their ideas, the things that they are part of the world now. And they left through the skin, leaving all the holes that became the
No, that's the Magna Gi, not the Daedra.
Yeah, the Atata left. Yeah, the Daedra is still around. They hung around because they were fascinated by Mundus.
Well, they were here, they left, and then they formed their planes around.
Oh yeah, in Oblivion though, not in Aetherius. Yeah.
Right, but they were originally part of the making of the world.
They were there at the time, yeah.
All of
they were around. They were sort of on the edges, poking fun.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think
we'll have to talk about that later because I'm seeing something completely different. But anyway, I would like to know the sources on that because I certainly may be wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
We could have it wrong too.
No. My thoughts on that are the monomyth, but we can check that afterwards. Yeah. But yeah, the idea of but the words you were using there just kind of reminded me that we of Boethiah's words, which I think are somewhere else in the sermons, of we give ourselves to you, the frame maker, a cloak of dirt for us to cherish you in, and which makes me think that the Lorcanic perspective is still to think the cloak of dirt, the mortal world, is something to be thankful for in some way. So why there's a punishment for being mortal here is something that I'm scratching my head about.
Well, but to be made of dirt is to be treated as such by your jailers. That's the next line. Yes. Yeah. And that is something that Vivec will often talk about, is how the Aedra are liars and bastards.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the key and the lock of the Daedra. Why do you think they escaped this compromise? In other words, the whole point of the Daedra is that, of worshiping Daedra and so on, is that you are fighting back against your jailers, and that the Daedra, Vivec would suggest to us that the Daedra stuck around so that mortals would have that advantage. Is that true? I don't know. Vivec thinks it is.
It's a perspective.
Yeah,
Let's go
it's
with
a way
that.
of looking at it. Yeah. Velothi, your skin has become the pregnant darkness. My brooding has brought this on. We talked about this in the previous session about the idea that Vivec is suggesting that Vivec's mood has turned the Velothi, has turned the Chimer into Dunmer. It's awfully hard to find somebody to corroborate on that version of the story. It seems like almost everybody in ESO and other places talk about the Velothi as being either cursed by Azura or being turned into Dunmer because of the Dwemer. You get all kinds of things. Rarely, if ever, do you get, this happened because Vivec was in a bad mood. That's not a story that you often hear. But anyway, my brooding has brought this on. Remember that Boethiah asked you to become the color of bruise. How else to show yourselves people of the Exodus into the vital pain? So here Vivec is sort of artistically trying to suggest that the Velothi are showing their Exodus, their differentiation from the Altmer, as turning themselves to the color of a wound. Even Vivec's account to the rebellious priest agrees with the
It's a reiteration of Sermon 10. It's the shift you in your skin, I say to the Trinimach Eaters. Pitch your voices into the color of bruise.
And so fourth, the sage who is not an anvil, a conventional sentence and nothing more, by which I mean the dead, the fourth walking way. All right, holy shit. All right, okay.
Yes, we were going to get to mantling.
Sooner or later.
Yep.
I'm Googling my own document. All right. So fourth, yes, Stormcrown is mantled by the way of the fourth, the steps of the dead. That is what we're talking about here. The sage who is not an anvil, a conventional sentence and nothing more, by which I mean the fourth walking way. So so Boethiah says, a cloak of dirt. That, speaking of the mantle, a cloak of dirt also, by the way, a reference to a term that Vivec threw around, Kirkbride and Coolbin used to throw around, which is Tatterdemalion. That's where that comes from. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So they kind of had the idea of the tatterdemalion being a wastrel or a homeless person who is wearing tatters and is poor and filthy and so on. And that was kind of like the kind of vision that they had for Lorcan of a disheveled, horrid, reject.
Certainly in the Khajiit version, the kind of endless wanderer.
Mm-hmm. And anyone has 6 more? Yeah. Oh no, we're all over it.
Yeah.
They picture Lorcan as Lewis Black.
the sage who is not an anvil. An anvil is a thing that it's things that are beaten against turn them into. An anvil turns something into a shape.
Yes.
So a sage who is not an anvil is a sage who does not make something into a particular shape. That's a sage without presuppositions, without something that's preformed, is the way I read that.
Okay. I was going to go as in, like, the sage who is not an anvil is therefore a hammer.
Are those the only two options?
That's where I'm coming from, because what it doesn't, like, if you look at it that way, you're also missing the thing that's being shaped. You have an anvil and a hammer, but you also have, but they're not doing anything without something to shape, so it doesn't really hold up, That's again, kind of the way I used to look at it, but.
But then again, if you are being the sage that is following the evidence wherever it leads or some such, then you need to allow yourself to be shaped by something else.
Okay.
But then again, why that then goes into a conventional sentence and nothing more, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Gagny's got it. The hammer, the thing being shaped, or the fire itself.
Ooh.
Well, I will not suggest that heat or the fire as a metaphor should not enter into this particular metaphor structure kind of thing that we're working with here. Because of the way the fire is important to Vivec and a number of things. The anvil's largely unchanged and endures.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
It's someone who does not allow ideas to change them. It's someone who is inflexible, who inflicts their own shape on things. It's someone who does motivated reasoning, those sorts of things.
So the sage who is not an anvil is a wise person who allows themselves to be shaped.
Yes. Allows ideas to shape them.
Okay, yeah, I could dig that. Yeah. I'm writing that down.
Yeah. Cool. Although, again, why that's a conventional sentence, I'm not sure, but...
yeah, a conventional sentence and nothing more. I get the impression that the Vivec's trying to say, hey, let's just, hey, relax. There's no magic here. Which doesn't make any sense considering the structure of the sentence. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot going on there. By which I mean the dead, the fourth walking way. So, if the sage who is not an anvil, what does that have to do with mantling?
Mantling is assuming a shape. Mantling is assuming a pre-established shape. It is allowing yourself to be manipulated into something like metal at an anvil, you are beaten into the shape of something else. So it sort of links obliquely. So
and you are shaped by the hammer. We'll get to that.
Yes.
Fifth.
You are shaped by truth.
Yes.
I will always go back to hammer equals truth.
Well, I will too, but I think we differ in one key place. Fifth, proper comprehension of virtues, state managed and to be murdered. That's a proper comprehension of the virtues, :
yes.
State managed and to be murdered. So is the proper comprehension of the virtues means that you encourage state management and murder? Or that you agree with it?
Oh, I will let Zell say something because she looks like she wants to say something.
No, she does not.
Oh, okay.
Zell has no concept of what this sentence means or several others, and Zell's is
okay, cool. In which case, I will take us on a tangent into ancient Greek philosophy for a while, because this, or particularly Aristotelian philosophy, because one of the big things that that Aristotle was into was a branch of ethics called virtue ethics, which is basically that you are to be the thing, you are to be a good version of a thing. You are, in order to be a good person, you do the things that it is said that a good person does. You display certain virtues. You are magnanimous. You are kind when the situation calls for it. You are charitable when the situation calls for it. You give friendship when the situation calls for it, when it's all appropriate. But this is all, when you look at the things that Aristotle is calling for and you look at it in a slightly wider lens, a lot of the stuff that Aristotle is calling for is the ideals of the proper the proper Athenian aristocrat. That a lot of what comes across in Aristotle's work and in Socrates' dialogues particularly as well. I mean, as they differ on some key points, and Aristotle is much more a virtue ethicist than Plato. But there's the idea that the virtues, what a society considers good, is shaped by that society in and itself. And so, in order for a I totally misread that. That totally takes all the air out of my point. I read state managed. that takes all of the air out of what I was thinking about.
Oh, state managed. No, stage managed.
No, stage managed.
Did I say state? I might have said state.
Yeah.
Stage managed and to be murdered.
Might still say it's the same thing, though.
It could be, because stage managed means like directed.
Yes.
By somebody. And so controlled and to be murdered for Vivec means, marriage.
Change.
Yeah, changed.
But if we take that to be all the sort of same thing, then it's the ideas of other forces shaping something else, almost, that someone is virtuous because they are said to be so by their contemporaries, by the judgment of society, because society shapes what the virtues are.
And therefore a proper comprehension of the virtues could be something that is managed.
Yes.
By
society at large, but yes. And
no caps lock. Why?
Although also then that means that it's not necessarily murdered, because society is ever changing, therefore it's a living thing. So I don't know whether that quite fits.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
In the end, rejoice as a hostage released from drumming torment, but that savors his wound. So a hostage released from drumming torment, hammering.
Or the tormentor of the material world, because Lorcan is the doom drum.
Yeah, and what I'm suggesting here is that Lorcan is the one doing the drumming, doing the hammering. This is like, the idea of like wielding the hammer to create truth, or that truth is a hammer. My interpretation of this metaphor, the symbol, is that you create truth by hammering with force. And so whoever wields the hammer determines what is true.
Yes.
It's the idea of victor the truth is decided by the victor. The people who win in a conflict determine what actually happened in the conflict, because they're the ones who survive to go on and tell
the victors write history,
to tell the story. History is determined by the winner.
Felix has had a magnificent phrase in there, that to be a sword is to savor being hammered. In order to be a good sword, you need to be beaten.
Yeah, you have to be tempered. Yeah.
Yes.
That is good. The drum breaks and you find it to be a nest of hornets, which is to say your sleep is over. Okay, we've done hornets.
You wake from the dream that is reality, you achieve amaranth. Well, I know amaranth wasn't a thing when this was being written, but the drum breaking is, again, doom drum material world, etc. Synecdoche going on.
Yeah, and the drum breaking means that the concept of Lorcan no longer exists.
Yeah,
you've broken the you've broken Mundus, basically. Hey, there's Felix.
Yes. Hey.
Yeah, Lorcan is
There he
the
is.
beating heart of the world. So when the heart
Mhm.
stops beating is when Mundus dies.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Hello,
I'm just
Felix.
Hello.
hello.
Yes, if anyone has their square of, oh hey, I'm playing bingo and someone joined the cast halfway through, here you go. Free bingo square. It is my
Yeah.
gift to thee, Red Legions, for I love you. Yeah, what did I miss?
We're about halfway in.
Hey,
Eh?
all right.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
Sermon 32. It's a bunch of sentences that
Yeah.
are, mostly opaque.
Yeah.
That could you be more specific? That's all the sermons.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness, Sermon 29 isn't a bunch of sentences.
Yeah, it's true. And
True.
36 is
Okay. It's the
relatively
exception,
straightforward.
not the rule.
Yeah.
The suspicious is spectacle, and the lie is only theoretical inspiration.
Sorry, before we move on, can we unpack Hornets a bit?
Sure. So when Kirkbride was a cut, just a little cut, he was swinging on a swing in a playground, and it disturbed a hornet's nest. And the hornets swarmed out all around him and crawled all over his face and freaked him the hell out, and then flew off and didn't sting him.
Wow.
Okay.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
And so ever since then, Vivec, same thing. Kirkbride has kind of viewed hornets as being a sort of like a I don't know. I think he thinks of them as like a little bit of a supernatural kind of thing, like a little like a sign of some kind. And I don't know what that has to do with the sentence. As a matter of fact, it's been mentioned before in the 36 lessons, and
Yes.
and I wasn't sure what it meant then either.
I've had rough things again going back to Amaranth, which again I know wasn't a thing when the 36 lessons were being written, but the I can't remember the exact phrasing. It was the phrasing that introduced the Amaranth as a concept. It was the thing that Kirkbride posted on the forums.
About the whirling,
the thing of someone waking up, whales knowing free will is the sentence I'm going from, which is kind of you have yourselves a nest of hornets, which has suddenly sprung on you. What's your reaction? You scream. It's shocking.
Okay,
it's that sort of a reaction.
And what he did was he didn't move. He froze up. He froze up. He didn't move. He just sat there and let it happen.
It's
that
the sort
probably
of
is what saved him.
It's the sort of awakening to the world is more what I'm thinking of.
It could be. It could also be, hysteria without madness or whatever, or without fear. It could be being in a terrible situation and then just remaining calm and letting it pass through you. Letting all the terrible stuff happen and then just leave.
Yep. I found it. To the closed dreamers, don't forget the amaranth. There is one step beyond Chim, but you're right that it is not godhood. It's the flowering of a statehood where the images you give birth to in your dream, stolen ? From the first dreamer, wakes up, wails knowing free will, and begins to dream in the same way. Children of liberty without end, and then the music lives forever as a pirate radio tuned against the rules of heaven and the vulgarities of hell. That's the thing that I was vaguely remembering. Just as something to link into that, the idea of whales knowing free will. It again feels like that's kind of a moment of the drum breaks, the world falls apart, and then you are left with something else. It feels like the moment of the Amaranth to me. I don't know whether I'm wrong in that, and then the various bits that go on about the dream. Why specifically pirate radio? Good question.
Because it's been stolen from heaven and hell.
Yeah.
Broadcast or Earth, or mortals broadcasting their own signal
illegally
instead of
Yeah. Does anybody know anything about pirate radio from like in its heyday? In like the early early-ish 90s, late 80s.
I know bits, but depends on what you would want to know.
I know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I know it earlier than that more than anything else, but
so pirate radio was a thing before the internet, and a lot of TCP/IP protocol was written. Early TCP/IP protocol was written with the with radio communication standards involved, like the way that you the various radio standards for authentication in radio communication informed the way that authentication was created over the internet, and the idea of sending a signal to see if someone is receiving it, and then waiting for a signal back to say that it's been received, et cetera, et cetera. If anybody knows anything about, was it UDP versus PDP, I think, or something? There's a lot of double cross-checking and other communication that people have begun to realize is not really necessary for internet communication. But they're like that because of the way radio used to be run, or probably still is. And pirate radio was something that you would be able to do when you were usually broadcasting in AM, long range AM.
It would have to be because when they say pirate radio, my immediate association is for people in ships. That's why it was called pirate radio.
Yeah, it's
because you could broadcast a signal strong enough from outside of British territorial waters and still reach the mainland with some fair reliability. The most famous one over here was Radio Caroline, which was sort of a precursor to Radio 1. The BBC basically filched a whole bunch of Radio Caroline DJs where they basically turned legitimate. And
hey, steady paychecks are nice, man.
Sorry? Yeah, that's true. And you don't have to spend months on board a ship in order to have your job. And so the pirate radio is broadcast from outside of jurisdictions, which I think is the main thing. The kind of the idea of the rules of heaven and the vulgarities of hell in that particular statement is that a pirate signal is neither.
Yeah.
That it's outside of those known boundaries.
It can be, it's illegal, but also in the respect that it is generated directly from one person. You can think about it that way, It's
also I don't know about illegal. I know. I think extra legal is probably the more correct term because if it's done properly, then territorial laws do not apply. If you look up Sealand, that's another example.
Oh yeah,
Sealand. Hi, would you like to become a lord of Sealand? It's like
oh, you heard about that, huh?
Yeah. No, they did actually enter into some negotiations for hosting the Pirate Bay, as in the website. Because they're not subject to territorial laws.
So they were going to host it in Sealand, and the Pirate Bay guys were like, "How do we get the servers out there?" Yeah,
kind of a big logistical nightmare. Yeah,
it really was
a little bit.
Yeah, which I thought was hilarious. That the idea of like, hey, that sounds like a great deal. How the fuck do we get our machines out there? And I was like, yeah, that is.
We do a heli lift.
Yeah, we got it. You gonna get an OC 256 out to out there? Huh? What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So rent-free radio bandwidth streaming a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's something that would factor in because MK is American, so wouldn't necessarily have the same associations I do with
I don't know either.
The term. But
that's a good question. But it is something that I, by sheer coincidence, have been finding out a lot about because I've been researching the Russian woodpecker and a couple of other Cold War number stations. Just because they're freaky. like they're really creepy.
Number stations, those are fun.
Yeah, they're really, really eerie. And the Russian woodpecker was not a number station, but it was that's the Duga radar array in Ukraine. I find that shit fascinating. The way radar and radio keep bumping heads is really cool to me. So anyway,
Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, Elder Scrolls.
Then you add LiDAR. I was going to add LiDAR into the mix, which is just going to complicate things even further, but no.
So, okay, the suspicious is spectacle, and the lie is only a theoretical inspiration. All right, the suspicious is spectacle. This is Vivec's talked a little bit about spectacles before in terms of keeping your people fascinated by keeping them distracted from what's actually happening to them by the suspicion.
Look at the shiny thing over here.
Yeah, look at the keys. Yeah. Oh, look at the keys. And the lie is only a theoretical inspiration. I think this is something about performative conspiracy theory. Maybe I think it's about lying to the people and creating illusion to entertain them and to placate them while you create truth in the background.
I would associate that with the noble lie of Plato.
Yeah.
That Plato's idea that art had to have or art should be edifying, be ennobling. Art should communicate certain societal virtues,
right?
And even if it's utter rubbish, that you are that you're not telling the truth about a particular event, then you are telling something good. I mean, a good example of this is that movie where they claim that it was an American destroyer that salvaged the Enigma machines, which is creating the noble lie, so to in inverted commas, that America will save the world by doing all the good things and such like, and never mind what actually happened, and so on.
Chris had to stifle several mighty laughs.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's been the Wives of the South, I think, or something, whatever they're called, have been in the news a lot recently because of the shit they're trying to push on public education systems in the South, and they've always been a real fucking thorn in my side because I only got textbooks when I was growing up that were proofed by them. So, you mean
the Daughters of the Confederacy?
Daughters of the Confederacy. I think that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that organization has people working on the boards that approve education textbooks in the South. They have been like that for as long as I've been alive and probably longer. And they're the people who encouraged textbooks that said things like, slaves learned important life skills, and all that kind of shit. And, that helped them later in life when they were, and I remember we'd read that shit in high school and look at each other like, are they fucking kidding? And like a bunch of junior high school students looking at each other like, is this bullshit? This sounds like bullshit. And then
no wonder kids don't trust the education system, because the education system is garbage.
Yeah, the good slaves got treated better. Yeah, that kind of shit. And it's like, like Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, but he treated them real good. Oh yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah,
that's great news.
Did not.
Moms for Liberty, is that it? That might be it. Moms for Liberty.
Yeah. Okay. And right. The more like socially acceptable with names, because like that's the real 1984 shit that I absolutely hate about America. Is like anything that has the word like liberty or freedom in it is very much against those things.
It's the opposite. Yeah.
It's like Americans for freedom.
Sons of Liberty is the Metal Gear Solid, right? Yeah, that's right.
Are you saying that a particularly large insurance company is against the notion of freedom?
Freedom Mobile is actually
sorry. I've been subjected to enough ads because I watch the NFL, and I just remember liberty, liberty, liberty.
Oh, you poor bastard!
Let's not insurance ever.
This video just got claimed. Thanks for that.
Sorry.
But also Freedom Mobile, definitely not about freedom at all. So like it tracks.
Yeah. Okay.
We have fun here.
And the lie is only a theoretical inspiration. That's almost saying the opposite of what Plato is saying. The lie is not a practical inspiration. It's an inspiration to theory. And I know theory is a loaded word when you talk about Vivec.
Vivec, yeah, exactly. I think it's going to get explained a little bit more in this next part.
Okay. Because I also have a bit of a feel about that.
Okay,
go for it.
Is that it also kind of reminds me of when you're doing theoreticals in ethical debates of like, okay, so let's say hypothetically in this situation that I'm asking you to imagine that may or may not have happened, but just like as a thought exercise, let's go through this. That's always what that line kind of reminded me of, to be honest. Maybe it's right, maybe it's completely wrong. That's just how we do. But
I don't know. Like theory is it's such a sticky term, and I keep wondering if sticky, I don't know, an awkward term. I keep wondering if it's a term that Kirkbride chose because he liked the way it looked better than one that was a little bit easier to understand.
I always assume that it's basically a synonym for imaginary, or like
imaginary or
not
hypothetical.
real. So you think it's an inspiration, but it isn't really.
Well, take earlier in the lessons, Vivec talks about terror in theory. The theorist and the terrorist.
Okay, right.
Remember?
No difference between the theorist and the terrorist. Yeah.
Yes.
So when you say because if there's no difference between the theorist and the terrorist, then they must be the same thing. So where's the crossover between terror and theory? See,
putting it into action. Or
one
practice?
Justifies the going from real world inspirations for terrorism and such. One justifies the other because certainly with because.
Wow.
Generally speaking, regardless of your type of terrorism, you look at nationalist terrorism, you look at religious terrorism, you look at Marxist terrorism. Is particularly appropriate with this one. You look at right-wing terrorism. They're all based on theoretical things, generally idealized versions of a thing, but they're all based on theoretical constructs. And I'm using the term theoretically possibly a little lightly here. That they're not. I don't know where. Chris is nodding at me, so I'm possibly wrong with that.
Well,
but
my knee-jerk, my first gut reaction to the idea of the two of them being the same is that theorists intellectually argue for the way reality is. Terrorists demand with force, like children, that reality is that way. So a theorist wants candy and says, theoretically, if you give me this candy, I'll be better behaved and satisfied and I'll stop bugging you. And the terrorist says, give me the candy or I will literally blow everything up. Or nobody goes home unless I get candy, That was that was kind of that was the first place my head went back when I was thinking about that kind of stuff, and I couldn't ever shake that off. That because there's no difference between the two of them means that they both want things or are trying to make assertions. But I should also mention that in the context of that phrase, it doesn't work.
It's also bearing in mind this is according to the codes of Mephala. So think about this through the lens of sex and death.
Yeah.
And all things Mephala-y.
I think that's the way I determined it, that that theorists were like the difference between like sex and death is like theory and terror. Yeah, you see how I kind of tried to conflagrate whatever those two things. The way I tried to kind of mix them up is it was fairly weak, if I recall correctly, in the New World School. I kind of made it work, but I conflate. Thank you, Baka. I was trying to I was trying to
conflagrate. You were trying to set things on fire.
Trying to blow them up. Yeah. I was trying to make that work in the New World School, and I kind of like, if you're just reading it and not thinking too hard about what I was saying, it works. But the moment you start like going, what is he trying to talk about here? Then it doesn't. I'm still like shaky on it. It's one of those things that if I ever get around to finally bugging Kirkbride about exactly what these things mean, which might not be a very fruitful conversation, then I'm probably going to bring that up and ask him to guess about it.
Bearing in mind, I think that's probably worth it because terrorism is such a subjective term.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that is remotely agreed to it, even at the moment, is that it's a bad thing, and even that wasn't always historically true.
True. Yeah.
So,
if anybody remembers the 5th of November, then that's an act of terrorism that everybody loves to talk about. Yeah.
Also, there were people who actively called themselves terrorists and thought of it as a good thing until the 1920s.
Yeah, and there were people where it's like, oh, look at these anarchists, and like, excuse you, I'm not an anarchist.
I'm a terrorist.
Like,
Yeah,
like, sir, there is a distinction between the two.
And so, the magnificent phrase of "I'm a terrorist, not a killer."
Yeah.
Actually said by a member of the Narodna Volya when she was in the process of being arrested by a policeman in Russia.
The world only makes sense. The world will only make sense if you make it.
So
that you're dying and tell them you're dying, which what they feel truly. No, Owain, I think he's just gonna. He would just look at me and be like, "I got bad news for you." Get used to disappointment, Owain. Yeah. That would be his response. Get used to disappointment. So then, okay. So what we're getting at is this. But then, why do you ask? Do the Daedra wish to meddle with the Arbus? It is because they are the radical critique, essential as all martyrs. That some are more evil than others is not an illusion, or rather, it is a necessary illusion. So here's how that pertains to the previous thing about spectacle and theoretical inspiration. When Vivec calls the Daedra the radical critique, essential as all martyrs, I would like to hear you guys talk about that, because I've never satisfied myself with an explanation on that. A radical critique sounds familiar, and I can't place it exactly from where it comes from.
This is the only one that
makes me think of deconstructionism on top of deconstructionism and some academic writing that literally leads nowhere.
Yeah. Zels, you were saying?
It always radical critique, essential as all. That one always struck me as the self and the shadow self. This paragraph takes me back to the idea of the godhood as all of the Aedra and the Daedra and all the little spirits and everything as being pieces of a person. And so it is all that some are more the evil than others is not an illusion. Yeah, some of these bits are the shadow bits, and you can't ignore that. But it is a necessary illusion, because at the same time they are all part of this person, and you can't just do away with them and still have the person.
I think I thought for a little while here that what Vivec was trying to say was that some are more evil than others is an illusion, but you might think it's an illusion because you're thinking of like, well, if there's no good and evil, we've just rejected the Cloven duality. Right. So if there's no good or evil, then the idea that some are more evil than others doesn't really make sense. But Vivek's arguing that that's not true. There are some more evil than others on purpose as martyrs. They are martyring themselves by being evil. And when Vivec calls them a necessary illusion, Vivec's saying they are presenting the idea of being evil and terrible, Mehran's Dagon, Four Corners, etc., because that is a role that is necessary for them. Yes. This is the idea of like the conspiracy theory of the Arbus, that the Daedra were in on it, on Lorkhan's plan, and that the reason why they are still staying in oblivion and torturing Mundus is because they've martyred themselves. They've rejected returning to their natural state as Itata, and are staying behind to continue Lorkhan's work of creating the arena, of making life hell for mortals so that they can improve themselves and break out of the loop. I think that's the overall message of that last part, but but when it comes down to specifically interpreting pieces of like what one word means and what it's doing there, that's when the whole thing falls apart. That's what I can't quite figure out.
I kind of am very tempted to dive into a semi-simplified version of Hegel for this one, if I can.
Okay. Let's just bust
you're simplifying Hegel?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
We know all about Hegel.
Who doesn't really?
We've talked too much about Jung and Kant on this. It's time to get some Hegel up in here.
Yeah, absolutely. German idealism. I'm actually convinced that the Arabis is something like an abstraction of Hegelian stuff, the dialectic specifically. The in very simplified terms, which I'm probably misrepresenting the argument horrifically, because when you actually get into the substance of Hegel, it gets nightmarish and horrible, and sentences go on for more than a page. But
I've read shit like that.
Yeah. But basically, basically the yeah, the idea is that history is history is made, or the world is ultimately driven by this force of Geist, which is basically just spirit. That
Okay.
there is that Geist is trying to work its way through, not necessarily understanding itself, but towards some kind of self-realization, and so to speak. And the way that it does that is the progress of different things. That a thing gets posited, you have thesis, then you have its opposite necessarily arising. You have thesis versus antithesis, which will then eventually merge into a synthesis, and then the synthesis will become a thesis, which will then cause its antithesis to arise, and so on and so forth. So you get a constantly evolving process of history that, and which also involves bits and pieces about the abstract becoming the concrete as part of that process. I don't quite remember the mechanisms for that, but it's the idea of reality of the world being this spirit that is constantly seeking towards refining itself, towards making itself better. And when you think about you have thesis versus antithesis bringing synthesis, that's basically the process of argumentation. So the idea of the antithesis being a critique is something close to that. And so the Daedra are an essential part of if we're bringing that in, they're an essential part of trying to make the Arabis understand itself, trying to, if the Arabis, or if Mundus, if I can make that slight
I think
change
Mundus,
of things,
yeah.
Rather than the Arabis. If Mundus is the thesis, Oblivion is the antithesis, and then we can start thinking about the Daedra mucking about with Mundus.
Synthesis.
Yeah, I thought that too. Yeah. I'm glad someone else is on the same wavelength as me. This is good.
Yeah. Is thesis, antithesis, synthesis a form of enantiomorph? No. Because
it's a transition.
It's the opposite. It is a transition, but it's not an enantiomorph, because it's not the case of there are winners and losers. It's the case of the two things becoming one new thing. It's 2 + 2 = 4, rather than one thing versus another, and one thing emerges the victor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea of the Daedra being that constant critique, being that constant antithesis to what Mundus is, and being the thing that will help Mundus be a better Mundus, cut Mundus into a better shape, in some way, is kind of the idea. As I'm seeing that, is how I read it. But
yeah, I honestly think that there's a way to interpret the term radical critique in a way that agrees with that. I'm wondering if it's maybe actually a term that Kirkbride's familiar with from something, you know, like but I don't know what it is, and I'm not so well read that I could pull it out of my ass, and even if I was well read, I probably still couldn't do it.
All I can think of is radical freedom.
That's the first thing that popped into my mind too, and this has nothing to do with radical freedom. Although I guarantee you, when Vivec was in college, that motherfucker was all about radical freedom. I guarantee you, Vivec was all about radical freedom and what's that other thing? The bullshit legal thing that people are doing in America now.
Postmodern neo-Marxism?
No. Felix, you probably know it. It's where people are claiming that they're not able to be sovereign citizen. Thank you, Yagni. Somebody in chat got me. Yeah.
Oh, the Sov-Cit people. Oh,
sovereign citizens and anarchists and yeah.
Wait, anarchists or ANCAPs? Because there's definitely a difference.
Excuse me, ANCAPs and anarcho-capitalists. Yeah,
like I mean, like, not to defend all anarchists, because speaking as a self-professed anarchist, a lot of my fellow anarchists piss me the fuck off. But yeah, like the Sov-Cit movement is just kind of ridiculous in terms of oh no, the highest possible law in the land is a sheriff, and I'm like,
yeah.
no, actually, like,
it might
how
have
are
been at
you
one
this
point.
dense?
Yeah, might have been at one point, but it ain't now.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of, you know what, maybe people should get together and make their own laws based on their communities, their, you know, provinces, states, nations, etc. I think that there is an argument for that, but then that also runs into the problem of the tyranny of the majority, right?
Wasn't
So,
that
like,
kind of what happened in 1776 or something like that? That's already been tried.
Okay, so, well, even then, about 1776, it wasn't really about, like, the more I've learned about it, it wasn't entirely about taxes and tea and no taxation without representation. It was also about some other weird stuff. But anyway, all this to say, to actually get back to the original thing about Elder Scrolls, is the end quote is kind of reminiscent to me about the idea of quit mixing up your gods and demons, or your angels and demons. About kind of like seeing the bigger picture. And with regards to you know, some are more evil than others, and it's not an illusion, or rather it's a necessary illusion. I kind of link that to certain ideas about how we think of metaphor, and how we're meant to kind of just not look too deeply at it, and more take the message from it, or what it's meant to represent. So, you know, Malakath, yeah, clearly very much a bad dude, but to me it's also kind of like, right, but these are also byproducts of the world and existence. It kind of starts to tackle that idea of, so why do bad things happen to good people? Is it God testing you? Is it just that the universe is a cruel and uncaring place? Is it something else? The mighty giant cosmic anglerfish desires for you to be like a little slightly bruised because that like tenderizes your meat for his delicious gullet. Like, I don't fucking know, right? And so I think that that's kind of more where my interpretation. What, Chris?
Baka, stop! Get out of my mind, Baka.
I don't have stream open, so I don't. What did he say?
Baka's talking about Outer Wilds. I don't know if you've played that game, but
no, I have not.
There's a giant cosmic anglerfish in it, and you should play it. It's fucking perfect.
It's bizarre that you came up with that without having played that game.
Because my friend in high school, one of my good friends in high school, had what he called the God is an anglerfish theory, which is that bright white light that you see when you die is actually the lantern of the giant anglerfish, because it's finally time to harvest your soul.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? That sounds about as valid as anything else. And we just had fun with it. And I guess someone at Outer Wilds like heard us talking about this and said, oh, you know what? That'd be a really great idea. So thank you for this. I got to sue somebody for copyright infringement.
Oh, it's such a, not after you play that game, you'll be grateful it got made.
Okay. Well, in any case,
beautiful game.
The main point I'm trying to say is that, I've always kind of interpreted that last bit about, like, you know, certain things are air quotes necessary for the world to function. And this is reflected in either several myths or polytheistic religions. Most notably and most famously, at least to people these days, would be Hinduism, with the idea of Shiva being the destroyer. It's so that Brahma can come in and like create the world anew, and then Vishnu preserves it and sends his avatars, and like that's just kind of how the wheel of time works, right? The ancient Greeks, it's like, oh, well, you know, Hephaestus is in his forge, and that's why volcanoes go off, and sometimes that means people die. Like, that's the gods. They are cruel and uncaring, kind of like the universe, or that's why you have to do certain things to avoid displeasing them. And it just kind of, it all boils down to that, you know, having to explain a somewhat unexplainable facet of existence, and that's why everything has its place, even if it's a bad place. So, you know, Malakath, Sheogorath, Molag Bal, yeah, all very much bad dudes, but it's kind of like the air quotes necessary evil, because it's a part of existence and what makes it air quotes function, for lack of a better term.
Yes, it's part of what makes reality what it is. It's what makes it a testing ground. To go back to the whole sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis model, the idea of that if the thesis and the antithesis kind of moving together to become a synthesis, which then becomes a new thesis, so the thing that was the answer suddenly becomes not the answer anymore, or at least an incomplete answer, then the idea of some ideas being better than others, and some way and ideas being Daedra here, but some of those ideas being better than others, being a necessary illusion, you have to think that some things are better than the others in order to start that conversation, to go through that comparison and so on.
Okay, so I just thought of another good kind of metaphor.
Cool.
Not entirely Elder Scrolls related, but it is something that I've kind of gone down the proverbial black hole of it. Is about the theory of gravity and how like it's like not actually real. Like, I know it sounds weird, but here's the thing. According to scientists, is like, okay, gravity as we know it is very much a real force, which is why we have the theory. But emerging scientific studies based on like movements of the stars, how things behave around black holes, quasars, etc., is like this all doesn't actually hold up to 100% scrutiny. And so the new kind of emerging idea is that gravity is actually the byproduct of some other unknown force that we haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah,
and so in that sense, gravity is air quotes a lie, because it's like, it's not the real thing. It's just a thing produced by a thing that we're kind of having to deal with at all times.
Yeah.
But what the original thing is, no one quite knows right now. And that's one of the great scientific mysteries going on. And this is why every now and then you will see some very interesting and very good videos or articles about like gravity is fake. And you're like, wait, what? And then it actually kind of explains the scientific reasoning. And then you get other absolute schlock, which is like, gravity is fake. And it's all just, you know,
it's all bullshit.
Nonsense.
That's it.
And that's why I need to sell you vitamins. Like it's always
it's
that.
all gnomes.
Yeah, it's all gnomes all the way down.
Yeah, on the subatomic level, they have identified the particles that are responsible for all of the other forces, but there is no gravity particle.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's why it's like, you know, gravity technically doesn't exist, but it also does. And so we just say like, yeah, gravity is very much a thing, because that's the you know, the necessary lie, the necessary illusion of,
it's the working theory.
Right now, this is what we got to work
theory,
with.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, this is what we got to work with, so just deal with it.
Well, there's some scientists who've been working on trying to model the universe from a perspective of time not existing or not being a thing. It's just that we're like the idea of like the state of the universe is constant and everything is happened and happening and etc., and that the only reason why we're seeing a past and a future is because we are not able to view that level of dimension, basically, in the same, like, you know, 3D, 2D kind of, you know, thing of Flatlanders.
So the universe is actually Aetherius, and we're trapped on Sep's dead skin ball?
Well, the idea is that our perception of time is an illusion created by our inability to fully perceive reality.
Yeah.
Right,
And
we know our senses filter out more than they let our conscious minds be aware of.
Exactly.
At any time.
And so scientists there have been some theoretical physicists who are screwing around with the idea of trying to model the universe as in a constant state of existence, that it had no end or beginning, and that they're just trying to consider reality from a higher dimensional viewpoint. And seeing if that can get us anywhere. Like, if we think about things this way, are there any advantages to using models that consider the universe this way? And that's what they're working on right now. Doesn't mean anything, you know, because arguably, if we can't ever perceive the universe that way, then working on models that work like that does us no good whatsoever. Because we're never going to be able to comprehend reality that way. So why should we bother, you know, explaining reality in a way that none of us can interact with or get any practical use out of, you know?
Exactly.
So
it's not necessarily even practical use. It's the idea of being able to wrap your head around it. It's if it does work that way, great. But how do you then comprehend it in a way that
how do you build a computer that works in a dimension higher than you do?
Yeah.
You know, how do you write an equation, for that matter, that works in a reality higher than you?
And this brings us back to metaphor, and why, like, it's always about trying to explain things or get people to think about a concept in a certain way. Like I know I think it was I forget if it was you, James, or maybe Chris, where like during one of our casts we did mention about the idea of like it came up about how to perceive time and water, and
Yes.
like it was about like, you know, imagine a river, right? Like it's constantly flowing, but you're there at that one part of it, and it empties out into the sea where it spreads out, and yet it's always reborn at its source upstream. So and it's always flowing and moving.
That's
and so
ontology,
like the water from the top eventually flows down to the end, and yet it seems that there's always still more water coming up there, and so
because
it's always
it
just there and
then
happening all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
you know, like and like while that's useful to kind of get people to think about something a slightly different way, it's still incomplete.
Yeah.
Right. And I get the same vibe from like the sermons of like, oh yeah, you know, walking ways. You're not actually walking a certain way. It's, you know, it's all fucking metaphor. It's all fucking metaphor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, ultimately, if God is infinite, we know the human brain cannot do infinite. So when something is too complex for us to wrap our little mortal brains around,
that's where metaphysics comes from. Yeah.
Is God
so we build a model and then
the
we study the model.
Context?
Is God infinite in the Elder Scrolls context? I think you need to define what infinite means. Yeah. And I've actually thought a lot about this because so when you say God, you're probably thinking about Anu, but you could be thinking about Godhead.
Right.
So if you consider infinite to be something that does not die, then you have to think about then it's comfortable to think about like Anu perhaps as an entity that exists outside of time and therefore will never die because it was never born.
Right.
Is it infinite? In a way, in the respect that it exists outside of finite space. It is not subject to the laws of finite physics.
So here's the question. For everyone here in the cast and everyone in chat, real quick, what is the difference or distinction between infinite and eternal?
Okay, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do
you want an answer? Or
yeah, happily.
Yep.
But also like to give people a chance to think of that. Like, never really considered that before.
Infinite is not is difficult because when you're considering the idea of infinite, you're considering something that is neither large nor small. That is neither that doesn't begin or end. It has no area. It has no volume. It is impossible to measure. When you talk about something that is eternal, you're thinking about generally speaking, it's within the frame point of time. Eternal started at some point or began when everything else began and ends theoretically when everything else ends, but it is still limited within the span of a continuation of a continuum, I should say. Whereas infinite doesn't labor under that. You know?
Chat is got it right. That eternal is pointing to something that exists for or is infinite in respect to time. It will go on forever, so long as there isn't ever, so long as there is a time. Yeah. Whereas infinite has other connotations. I'm within an Elder Scrolls context. I will go back to the Elder Scrolls themselves, because there's one text that points out that you have a shelf with the Elder Scroll with say 200 Elder Scrolls on them, or however many it is. You take one off the shelf, you count them again. There will still be 200 Elder Scrolls there because they're what's. I equate that with the term actually infinite. I can't remember. It's not something that you will then add so much to that it will be an infinite number. It's that it is always an infinite number. It is always something that's going to do. You can take as much out of it as you like, but it will always be the same amount because it's an infinite thing.
Right.
And that's probably as close as you get to infinity within the Elder Scrolls. Everything that is called a god is in some way quantified, whereas the scrolls are the scrolls are accounted to be above the gods in some texts, so they are differentiated from that. They are an infinite substance in some way, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, so there's 5 different types of infinity in mathematics.
Okay.
There's different types of infinities in physics. There's different types of infinity in metaphysics. So the answer is with all, like, every time I give an answer on this cast, it's always, well, it's complicated, and that's
because it is.
That's your answer here.
It is.
So but in terms of wrapping up 32, which it's too late for, but we're going to do it anyway.
Well, sorry, just real quick before you do that though, I just want to say that, like, my version of, like, the distinction between infinite and eternal, just to really boil it down and also kind of touch on Elder Scrolls aspects to an extent, is infinite, like, volume or lack of volume. So it, to me, that's kind of more akin to space. Yes. Whereas eternal relates to time.
Yeah.
The space and time, that, and like the interplay between them, that's kind of, for me, how that's always boiled down.
Yeah. And so when we're when in terms of the truth, which is what this sermon is about, try going back through the sermons. Try going back through the sermons and look at every time Vivec talks about lies. And consider that Vivec's, from this sermon, we gather that Vivec's impression of truth is something that is determined by a hammering, by a great act of force.
Okay.
If that's the case, then how does he define a lie? If there is no cloven duality of truth and lies, and that truth is only something that's determined by the person with the biggest hammering, what determines a lie? Is it something that the guy with the hammer has determined is not a lie, or is not the truth? Is it therefore a matter of opinion?
Just on a quick skim through, a lie is something that brings change. We'll get to this in Sermon 33, but we've got Lie Rock to talk about next time.
It's something that goes against truth.
Yeah. But
interesting.
But it's the sense of, and just having a look through, lies have turned them into biters in Sermon 21. So from that we can say that from that perspective, Vivec thinks that lies change things. Lies can change the Aedra in some way, shape, or form. And the water face cannot lie. It's too busy to think, much less lie. So that's just, it's a purposive thing. And the beginning place, the foul lie, which suggests that creation itself is a lie, and then you get to Sithis and the idea of everything that's to do with creation and so on. Because Sithis being the original creator, I can't remember whether that's something that is in a Vecian text or not, but the idea of existence and so on being a lie in itself, because existences change. If just to knit those theories together,
that's brilliant.
Well, a lie is a theoretical inspiration from this sermon, and so the lie is the beginning of the suggestion that becomes truth.
Go ahead.
So you so the truth has been established, and then all of a sudden someone hands you a giant fuck off hammer.
Right.
And you say, "Well, I don't like this truth. So and so Vivec is immortal. Don't care for that. So I'm going to lie and say Vivec is a god. And then I'm going to hammer the shit out of everything until that lie becomes truth."
Yes.
So the lie is theoretical inspiration. It's, I've got an idea, I've got a theory. It's the inspiration of a concept of a theory, of a model, and then the great hammering occurs, and that model becomes truth.
Right.
Yes, which again goes back to the whole theorist terrorist thing.
Yeah.
That you have it implies that the way that 36 Lessons is using terrorism is the sense that all terrorism is utopian. That that in the sense that terrorism is reaching for a reality that does not exist yet, and it's trying to use violence to make that reality happen. So all terrorism has its roots in a theory, in a normative theory, in a theory of how reality should be.
Reach utopia by violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
my take on the sermons has always been very meta. I always ask myself, why did Vivec use these metaphors? My take on it has always been that the entire thing is Vivec sculpting reality. He wants people to believe this. He wants this version to become what is real. And part of what is contained in here is a very brutal cutting down of Molag Bal. And we assume that somewhere in here, there actually was an attack by Molag Bal on Vivec. We don't really know what that looks like. We have Vivec's story of it, which Vivec portrays in a certain way, in metaphors that are comfortable to Vivec.
Right. Yeah.
I would argue.
To play Vivec, to play herself up.
Yes.
You know.
And then there is the story of Muatra and all of that entails. And every time people are telling the story of Muatra, which people love to tell because it's a fun story, right? You're picturing Molag Bal with no penis. And that cannot possibly be good for Molag Bal's overall. I mean, that's got to hurt Bal. I mean, for a creature who's made up entirely of thought, to have people picturing the god of
the king of rape.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Right, the king of rape.
How do you rape without one?
That ain't good. So my take, there's a poem in Sermon 12 that I have always believed was Vivec speaking directly to Molag Bal about his intentions in this text. And there is a line, "Hell, my sweet, is a fiction written by those who tell the truth. My mouth is skilled at lying, and its alibi a tooth." And I have always believed that is him saying, I am telling this story, and regardless of whatever happened, at the end of it, this is going to hurt you. I'm going to get the last word in, and it's going to hurt. The idea of lying being, I mean, in the context that y'all just framed it, that really adds a lot to those lines taken in that context. Thank you so much.
And because, yeah.
I had never considered any of that.
Because Vivec has a giant fuck off hammer.
Welcome to the Selectives
Lorecast.
Yeah.
He attempts to reconciliate with his ultimate abuser. Yeah, maybe.
We pepper in truth bombs here and there.
Yeah. Oh, and a wine is saying, could it be as simple as Molag Bal broke Vivec's heart? I don't know whether it's as simple as that. I'm kind of having, given what ESO adds to the Molag Bal Meridia relationship, is Meridia Molag Bal's Vivec rebound?
I have wondered something like that, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, a new hand touches the boobies.
Beacon. Yeah. The boobies.
Well, she is
someone take the internet away from me, I swear to God.
Yeah.
So that's 32. So are we doing 33 on the 16th?
In theory, yes.
Yes.
But,
Okay.
That is what's on my calendar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I think it should be okay. Yeah.
So hopefully on the 16th, we'll see everybody.
Yep.
But thanks for tuning in. Everybody wave bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I can't wave, but I'm waving.
Okay.
You need to